Hello to everyone and welcome to this to the ETIS webinar. Today we embark on a journey to unravel the potential of generative AI within the telecom sector. And since we focus on the AI topic today, let me just start with a quick AI related announcement. As we acknowledge the importance of AI and see a huge interest in the ETIS telco community and across other industries as well, we decided that our umbrella theme for the ETIS Annual Community Gathering 2024 will be shaping the future of telecoms through the power of AI. So the ETIS Community Gathering 2024, as you can see, will take place in the 4th and the 5th of June in the beautiful Prague next year. And we promise an unforgettable experience. We expect over 14 focused working groups running their own meeting agendas in parallel, over 215 attendees, and overall over 50 sessions that are awaiting you at the next ETIS gathering. So don't forget to save the date and to reach the ETIS team if you have any questions. The official registrations for the event, it will be open in January. So stay tuned and visit our ETIS website at www.etis.org. And now let's get back to our aim for today, which is to shed a light on this sophisticated technology, enabling a clearer understanding of its applications in telecommunication. Our presenters will guide you in strategically embracing its benefits while understanding and managing associated risks. Throughout this session, we'll explore how Gen AI can enhance customer interactions and streamline service operations, offering practical insights into its diverse applications. Moreover, we'll discuss strategies for fostering an inclusive environment favorable to the growth of Gen AI within the sector. A live demonstration will follow, showcasing Gen AI practical application in the field of communication services. Your engagement matters, as such, we'll reserve time for an interactive Q&A session towards the end. Many thanks to our presenters, Jonathan Phillips, Senior Director in Industry Marketing at Salesforce, Jared Okola, VP of Solution Engineering at ARIA Systems, and Alan Radzi, Senior Partner Manager in Telecom at AWS, as well as to all the other organizers that helped us in organizing the meeting. Thank you to everyone again for joining us on this journey of discovery into the potential transformation of telecom through Gen AI. I will now stop sharing. And before I just give the word to our presenters, please just let me give you some logistical aspects. So this session takes in total 1 hour. Please keep your microphones muted during the meeting in order to ensure the best sound quality for everyone. The session is recorded and the recording will be shared with you afterwards. The presentation support will also be partially available and shared with you afterwards. Please note this is an open webinar, meaning that we have participants across all the ETIS working groups, as this topic and its approach today is highly relevant for a variety of profiles. Hence, we have a very high audience here in the meeting. For any questions that you have, please use the Q&A function that you find at the top bar of the Teams app. And we will try to respond to some of the questions both in written during the webinar, but also we have the chance to raise your hands at the end and ask directly your questions. Depends on how the timing will allow us. So please enjoy the webinar and don't hesitate to use the Q&A channel. And with that, Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing your valuable expertise within the ETIS community, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We're really excited to talk about AI because it's a very hot topic in our world. I've been looking at the different trade publications that I get. In the last week, I've probably received 20 different articles about AI, various aspects of it in various domains. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about where we see from AWS, from Aria, and from Salesforce, where we see AI and where we see it applying. And so this slide really talks about the waves. Many of you have been doing AI for decades. I was talking with one colleague who wrote a paper about the use of predictive models when he was in university in the 1980s. And even, frankly, some of the operators around the world have been doing AI even before then. A lot of the concepts that we have in the world of AI actually came from the data arms of many of the operators around the world. I used to work for Northern Telecom, which had a big facility called BNR, Bell Northern Research, outside Ottawa, and they did a lot of work there in the 70s and 80s. We're seeing waves, we're seeing different generations, if you will, of artificial intelligence going through what we've done in predictive, now in the world of generative, going into autonomous and autonomy and their agents. And eventually, oh, looks like our picture got upside down, but artificial general intelligence, where these models will then become multi-purpose. Today, most of the tools are single purpose. And in fact, that's why we also have many different LLMs. And we'll talk about why you would use multiple large language models in one large implementation to serve different functions. And that's normal. So if we go on to the next slide, we talk about some of the stats. One of the interesting stats, and this is a report that just came out last month from Salesforce, we found that among, and this is focused very specifically on CSP employees, among those employees that are using generative AI, over half of them are using tools that are unapproved. And of those, over half of them are using tools that are actually banned by their employer. So our employees are using these tools, and we need to have proper information. And the bottom stat says 7 in 10 employees have never even received or completed training on how to use AI safely and ethically. And so that aspect of safety and ethics is really, really important. And we're seeing actually different governments coming into and having opinions about how they need to manage the safety and the ethical use. And frankly, that's a good thing. We need proper guidelines. The next slide talks about policy. And do we actually have policies? And so we'll see that some companies, and again, this is very specific to the communication service providers, about a third have clearly defined policies. About 23% have loosely defined policies. 28% have no policy at all, and 17% don't even know if they have policies. That's probably the scariest statistic. How could our employees actually not know if we have a policy? That's pretty scary. So the QR code that you see on the screen here will lead you to that report. You can actually filter it. One of the nice things we have at Salesforce, we have a company called Tableau that lets us embed dashboards inside a web page. And so you can actually filter it onto the specific industry of comms. You can also see it at large, or you can also see it for other industries. So there's some interesting things in that report, and you have the QR code. We'll come back to these QR codes at the end. The next slide gets a little bit deeper into trust and data. Famously, one of my competitors proudly said that they were going to take data from one communication service provider to fuel recommendations for a different service provider. I think that's a problem. In fact, I think that's probably illegal, at least in some jurisdictions. Your data is your data. It's not my product. Your data, in order to foster the trust that you want with your customers, has to be protected. That's one of the big points of GDPR, is to protect your data. And again, we did a study that customers are also reacting to that. And that's actually a global study on the right-hand side. 86% of customers are more loyal to companies whom they feel are ethical, who are treating their data in a trusted manner. And that's absolutely critical. We have to continue to manage and to fuel trust. So those are really critical pieces as we consider any use of AI, whether it's predictive or generative, or even eventually autonomous. We must have the guardrails around trust and compliance. So let's start talking about some of the more specific use cases. On the next slide, we have the results of a study that McKinsey did talking about different use cases across different industries, and we've highlighted the line for communication service providers. About 75% of the value that generative AI will deliver really falls into these four areas of customer operations, marketing and sales, software engineering, and R&D. And so we'd like to dive a little bit more deeply into these areas. And for that, I'm going to hand over to Alan, and we'll talk about some of the work that AWS.
Thanks, Jonathan. So at AWS Telco Business Unit, we've been looking at what are the different pillars that are interesting for generative AI within the telco. We're looking at a very wide range of different solutions and different problems that we can help resolving or help challenging with generative AI. Few examples are, if you look at the enhancing customer experience, from personalizing recommendations to any chatbot experience with or without an agent behind, all the way through smart home and use cases that has to do with your personal applications running. And we move on to employee productivity with anything that has to do with code generation, with testing data generation, a huge area that I think generative AI can help a lot with, training, support, searching knowledge bases, and coming with quick recommendations for resolution and anything around that, creativity and content with marketing aspects, with generating any content that today we have to work a lot harder in order to put together, and we're going to have a lot of assistance around that with the right tools for telco, and not only business operations. We're already seeing some of them, and I'm going to touch it in a second as well. We're already seeing a lot of interest around network planning, network troubleshooting, revenue leakage identification. We had a very interesting demo that we ran together in Copenhagen a couple of months ago around revenue leakage, where we were showing use cases together with Salesforce and other partners, where we were showing revenue leakage use cases. Very interesting results. On the next slide, we are looking at the research that we ran in the AWS Telecom Business Unit to check what is the interest, what is the sentiment around our customers, around CSPs, around the telco market in general towards generative AI, and how things boil around there. We're seeing a lot of interest, and all the researchers, some of them, the ones that Jonathan mentioned, I mean, if employees are risking to disobey specific rules or internal rules for the company and use unauthorized tools, it means something. It means that the interest is extremely high. We are seeing it when we are asking around as well. We're seeing a lot of interest around customer chatbots, around anything that has to do with replacing or augmenting, giving better tools, quicker tools to employees, but not only. As I said, huge value could be found in places, in areas that today are much harder to investigate, running through network data, which today is a very complicated task and requires a lot of engineering and a lot of knowledge and a lot of understanding, can be today done much tomorrow, today even, much faster with generative AI tools. And if you think about it and combine the silos, connect the silos of network and BSS and OSS, and be able to generate one beautiful picture out of those together, we're going to see in a minute Jared talking about specific billing use cases or revenue leakage that I mentioned before, or churn use cases of all types. It's the sky's the limit. at the next slide, I want to touch a little bit about where AWS plays part in that, or AWS offering plays part in that, and what AWS specifically has to offer to the general population and specifically to telco. So we start with building. Bedrock is a good example for the build phase, a very flexible animal that knows how to, or that can connect to different models in a very intuitive and very quick way, serverless, meaning you don't need to invest too much in order to connect to and to get the value out of it. AWS is investing a lot in performance with the Inferentia family, with Trainium family, with a lot of collaboration and partnership with NVIDIA. So we are investing a lot in the hardware that runs this all the whole operation, and are seeing amazing results out of that. Applications with Code Whisperer and other applications already using generative AI in as an AWS service and offering the wealth that it can provide to specific audiences. We are seeing very nice growth in using Code Whisperer and very good evidence to shrinking development times dramatically, thanks to us getting assistance from generative AI through the technical phase of coding. And if that is not enough and the existing models are not enough or not good enough, we are able to offer very large flexibility with tools like SageMaker and others, where if the model is not enough, you can build your own model, you can fine tune existing models, and allow the flexibility around that.
That's great. So, and that's a really important point. That flexibility is key. And so as we look at the next slides, we'll give you an example of an architecture. From our perspective at Salesforce, we of course have some great apps for customers to manage their business. We are bringing in data from a whole variety of sources, as Alon was discussing. And the keys, and you see them on the left-hand side of the screen, is the model needs to be, or the whole platform needs to be integrated, needs to be intelligent, clearly. That's why we're talking about AI. It has to have automation. It has to have low code and no code, and it has to be open. That's actually a really important point. That's why Alon was talking about the flexibility. On the next slide, even though I'm sitting in an AWS office, there's some other logos on this slide, because that's part of reality. Reality, we know in your environments and your networks, you have a whole heterogeneous environment. And you also will use very specific foundation models or large language models for different tasks. That's, of course, how business will run. Some business functions are generic. Back-end finance, code, contract clause generation. Those are pretty generic. And so there, yes, a general purpose large language model will absolutely make sense. Some functions are much more specific. We're going to talk in a moment about billing. And in that space, what happens in billing is a little bit unique in our world of communication service providers. And so that's why always we will have, as Alon mentioned, flexibility or openness to have any number of different tools that we can use. And so with that, I think I'm handing to Jared, and you're going to walk us through a couple of extra slides.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So just talking about how is AI going to be disruptive? Specifically, you look at your entire customer life cycle, from the initial marketing through your concept, your launches, your sales recommendations, going through the order creation process, making recommendations about what to add into orders, what are other people in the similar cohort purchasing, add this onto your order, helping in operations, helping with creating customer payment plans and moving through this whole customer life cycle and getting to the end of retaining those customers, right? Because that's what everyone wants to do, is they want to retain those customers that they've acquired throughout the course of time. But I think what we're going to end up seeing as AI gets more introduced into the different organizations is you're going to see a rewiring of these processes, and that customer life cycle that's been a more of a linear model in the past, or a circular model, is going to get rewired. And in the future, CSPs are going to have the ability to be more proactive and use data from the billing system, from the CRM system, from call management systems, and all of these, and network data. Take all of this information, put it together, have it in a data share, and then use AI to be more proactive instead of being reactive. Instead of, the demo that we're going to show you in a minute is a customer noticing a high charge, and the care agent reacting to that high charge. But in the future, what we anticipate seeing very soon is that the care agent, or the AI itself, perhaps in the future, will be able to be proactive and reach out to the customer before the customer notices the high charge, recognize that there was a high charge that was out of some kind of a band, and make a recommendation either to the customer via text message to say, hey, we noticed your bill was 30% higher than normal. Looks like you had excessive calls for this. Do you want to add an international calling plan? Those types of things. And again, being more reactive, more proactive instead of reactive to what's going on in the entire life cycle. Specific to billing, these are kind of the top four categories. I know there's a wide range of stuff that we see in billing, but sort of the top categories that we see so far are around curation of pricing, packaging, and positioning, having faster, accurate responses, making those, having the AI sit as a co-pilot, so that the care agent maybe doesn't have to do as much thinking on their feet, and can react faster without doing as much research. Having an automated knowledge support, quicker answers to questions, what product is better if, or why is my bill high, which is the demo that we're going to see in a moment. And then, making better proactive recommendations, looking at that past activity, current usage, and make proactive recommendations about what products the customer is using and what discounts you might potentially want to offer that customer. So with that, let me, let me hand it back to Jonathan briefly before we go into the demo.
Yeah, so there was a question about where do we see the stats? So some of their use cases, one of the stats that we know, and in fact, this is a very conservative number, but somewhere between 30 and 70% of all contacts or queries into customer care are about my bill. And so this is one of the first use cases, in fact, the first use case that we'll be rolling out in pilot in February. How do we help your customer care agents resolve billing inquiries faster? And so what we're going to see in the demo that Jared shows is a typical Salesforce screen where we're seeing all of the characteristics of who our customer is. We're bringing in data from the billing solution, so ARIA systems, and it could be, in fact, multiple billing systems. Again, being in a heterogeneous environment, you may have different billing systems for different functions. We can surface that information in a pane in the middle of the screen that you see here, and then using generative AI, we can go out and query the details of those bills and provide a synopsis or a summary and analysis of why the bills have changed. What are the anomalies? What's different? And then make a recommendation, as Jared was mentioning, of what should be done next. So with that, let's take a look at the demo.
Okay. So just give me 1 second here to stop sharing and pull up the
In the meantime, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A section. We already have a couple of questions that we will reply after the demo. We'll respond live to your questions as well. So just don't hesitate to ask your questions in there.
Okay, and I'm bringing up the demo environment now. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So in this particular scenario, I'm acting as a care agent. I have a customer that has, called into a call center. Maybe they started out with a chat bot and went through the process of making an inquiry via the chat bot. The chat bot maybe got to a certain point in the process, but couldn't completely answer the question. So therefore handed it off to the care agent. And in this case, the care agent can come in here and they can see the billing details surfaced up. We can see, the account details here. We can see the current unbilled usage here, and then we can see the most recent invoice and all that information related to this customer. If I go into the history, we can see previous invoices, previous payments for this customer, and have all of that information available and be able to review this information, in this case, surfaced up from the ARIA billing system. But in this case, the customer has noticed a high charge on their bill, and they've called to inquire about why that particular bill is higher than the others. So we have a prompt over here that is related to a high bill on the right-hand side of the screen. And, I can go ahead and click on that prompt and then say, I want to compare this invoice, which is the one the customer's calling about, to the other invoices. Now, normally at this point in the process, the care agent would be putting the customer on hold, saying, let me look at your previous invoices, making comparisons and doing all this lookup to figure out what's going on. In this case, with the AI as a co-pilot, they can say, analyze this invoice, tell me what's going on with that invoice. And in this case, there's a significant number of international calls, and we see that those calls were made to Singapore. Now I popped the invoice up over here, the invoice details, and over here we can see there's international calls listed on the bill, but not calls to Singapore specifically. So we're using the AI to look into that data, look into the database, and see on the individual CDRs where those calls were being made from, and return back as part of the prompt the top 5 charges and where those calls were made to. So we can see that those calls were made to Singapore, and those are the top 5 calls over the course of time. And then make a recommendation. And there are a number of recommendations, but one of the recommendations is to add an international calling plan, right? That will have lower rates for international calls. And again, I have a quick button here to add that international calling plan. So instead of going back into the entire order flow for this customer to create, to select the calling plan and add the calling plan, I can click on that button to add the new plan, and again, get a recommendation based on what this customer already has and what the needs are. Here is an international calling plan. I can select that plan, hit next to add that plan to this customer's account. And in just a second here, I will see that the order confirmation comes up and the plan has been successfully added. And now if I come back over here and refresh my screen, we'll see in the console, once it loads, we'll see that that information has been automatically updated and is giving me the information about that new plan that was added to this customer account. So we've added the international calling plan, and you'll notice here that the account balance is $17.56. The plan was actually a $25 per month calling plan. If we go down here and look, it's a $17 because of it proration. We prorated that plan and lined it up with the other calling plan that the customer has, so that they will have this prorated plan that they'll pay for now. And then going forward, that plan will be lined up with their regular billing dates. And so they'll get one invoice with both plans showing on the one invoice. So they'll have a unified calling plan. And then I have the estimated amount of my next bill. Again, all this information is surfaced up from the ARIA billing solution into these Salesforce screens that we're looking at for the billing inquiry manager. I can also here click on a quick link. So within ARIA, we've built quick link capability, so we can quick link out to the ARIA UI and go straight into a cash credit screen. So I might want to issue a cash credit for goodwill, and instead of having to build that screen out in the Salesforce UI, I can instead have a quick link into the ARIA UI, come in here, create the credit. I'm going to apply that credit here. We'll see up here that the account balance has been updated. If I go into the account overview, we'll see that here's the information about my customer account, and you can see that here are the two plans, the international plan and the work from home plan, which is the original plan. And then we can see the prorated charge that was added to the screen. If I go back over here to Salesforce and update the screen again, we will see that credit applied to the account, and it will update the account overview in real time. So now we have that credit applied here in real time, and it's also affected the estimated future billing amount. So we've gone through and again, you know, in this case, this demo is the more linear reactive model, but in the future, we think that it will instead start changing to that more proactive methodology where, you know, an alert will perhaps notify a care agent to take a look at this account because they've got charges that exceeded their bill by their previous 3 bills by 38%. So go and look at this account and maybe issue the credit proactively or offer to upgrade to the international calling plan proactively without the customer having to call in. So that is a brief overview of the demo. I'm going to go ahead and pull the slides back up.
Great, thanks, Jared. So that's a great example of taking the power of all of the data we have in our ecosystem. Again, we work with all of our partners to do that because that's critical. And that example of being proactive was, again, the example that Alon gave earlier about revenue leakage and going back and analyzing why bills are not being paid, pulling in information from different contracts, and having all of those assets available for your service people, your salespeople, in fact, even your customers themselves. This is a great quote that we had from Julie Sweet. We had an AI day early in June this year. And Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture, ended her discussion with our CEO talking about 5 questions to ask. And so as we think about the strategy of rolling out AI, it's really important to understand where it's being used and understand what are the risks. And then having understood those risks, how are you going to mitigate those risks? How are you going to monitor them? And at the end of the day, who's responsible? AI is a fantastic tool, but it needs to be used carefully. You don't give a chainsaw to a 5-year-old. You don't give AI to just anybody. And as we saw earlier in the presentation, some of the stats, there's a lot of people, your employees, already using AI, and they need guidance on what is safe and what is ethical. Next slide, we have a series of resources for you. Actually have 3 slides with some QR codes. So if you want to take a look, it's things like that statistic that I quoted earlier came from some Salesforce research. So you have that QR code, more information about Salesforce Communications Cloud. A webinar we did 2 weeks ago with Late Reading, talking about AI and how it's transforming the communications industry. And then also an article talking about the intelligence playbook for communication service provider. So some resources there. The next slide is actually a new report and a video that's actually pretty fun. We have some really interesting people on our staff at Salesforce, including one of the people who contributed to the original movie Minority Report many years ago. And so we actually asked him, Peter Schwartz, to talk about what the AI of the future would be. And so you have an interesting article and video on this slide. And the next slide is some work that AWS and ARIA have done with one of my competitors that I will not name. But again, this is part of our reality. I don't know, Jared or Alon, if you want to talk about this report.
Yeah, so this report is something ARIA and AWS got together with TM Forum, and kind of talking about taking the first steps, right? Organizations, thinking about all of those stats Jonathan gave earlier, right? Organizations need to build a strategy, and if you don't have a strategy, you're going to have issues, right? And those issues, depending on what data gets put out there, could be very serious issues. So this is a report that we put together to start looking at, what are those first steps that you need to take to build that strategy. What are the key technologies, the value chain, different strategies, how you can start using LLMs, and have good, solid implementations after doing experimentation. See tools for innovation across your business. Take the learnings and the parallels that we've all gone through over the last 20 years of that whole cloud journey and start applying some of those to the AI journey. But most of all, having that robust information architecture and having that strategy. Those are the clear points that need to happen. And you can access this. There's a QR code here, but you can also reach out to any one of the three of us, and we can get you a copy of the report as well. Oh, sorry. One last thing I want to mention too is ARIA is also sponsoring a second deep dive report. It's coming out in Q1 of next year, which will go into a deeper dive on all of these topics around generative AI, and we will be happy to share that with anyone that is interested.
Great, thanks. So we have quite a few questions in the chat. So let's go through those, and then we can see if there's any other live questions. So one of the questions in the demo that we just saw is the LLM, the large language model, trained in Salesforce or ARIA. It actually, in that case, was OpenAI that we used. And so in the architecture that we have, and this is going to tie into another question, we have the request, we're creating the prompt, we're inside Salesforce. And so you saw Jared click on that button, doing the billing analysis. We ground the prompt using data that we have in Salesforce and data that is retrieved from ARIA. We then mask the personally identifiable information. And there's a question about GDPR in a moment, but we mask that data to remove any personal information. We then send the query out through a trust layer to the large language model. That large language model, in some cases, could be hosted in Salesforce. In many cases, it would be hosted in AWS. It could be hosted in others. In that case, we were using OpenAI. We get the response back. We then fill the proprietary or personal data back in. Then we check for hallucinations and ethical use. And so those are absolutely critical. And this is how Salesforce works. We mask private data, query the LLM outside, delete the prompt after we're done, come back, put the data back in, and then check for hallucinations and bias in the response. And that is what is presented back to the care agent. So LLM can be anywhere. We're always checking for hallucinations and bias, and we're always removing any personally identifiable information to make sure that we're never going to expose your data to someone else. Right? Critical. Your data is your data, and that's how we we make sure that we do that. That is the Salesforce model for using generative AI. Specifically with respect to GDPR, again, we have fantastic partnership with AWS, leveraging their data centers around the world. We just frankly opened a data center on AWS in India in order to respond and be compliant with their data privacy laws. We've had data centers on AWS in several different countries in Europe for many years. And so that is how we always want to uphold the regulations that are important for you and important for the governments and the areas in which you work. And then Rakesh is asking a question about how we would get data from the OSS and BSS into the model. So again, grounding the prompt is what is critical, being able to provide as much context as possible, being careful not to reveal anything that's personally identifiable, but give the right context, give the right information to be able to have a good response. And that wasn't necessarily right there in this question, but having a human in the loop, reinforcement learning through human feedback, absolutely critical. And that is also part of our model. When the response comes back from the generative AI, we will always present it back to the customer service agent or the salesperson and have the results of what they do with the prompt then inform the creation of the next prompt. And so that reinforcement learning through human feedback or human in the loop is critical in the way we are deploying generative AI. Someday, will we get to models that are perfect where we don't need a human? Maybe. I don't see that anytime soon. We always want to make sure that we have the human in the loop in order to give their feedback and then make the prompt better. That's also part of what happens. Being able to ground the responses in past business performance is always a very important piece of feedback to the creation of the next prompt. And so that's absolutely part of it. How do you deal with AI from a security perspective? Is it blocked? Is it open for all? How do you handle sensitive information, especially in the area of billing? So again, masking, very critical. And you will also decide based on the user type, who can use which types of prompts. That's absolutely critical as you're deploying generative AI to think about what is the best use and who are the best users. Typically, the way we have been rolling out even predictive AI in the past is starting with a pilot group, making sure that they understand not only what is being predicted, but why it is being predictive. So giving the reasons for the prediction, even in a predictive world, has been critical to adoption. The more your users are informed, the more they will trust the predictions, and therefore the more they will use the predictions. And so we would envisage exactly the same thing as you're rolling out generative AI to make sure that your users are getting the right information.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for your answers. And I also filter a little bit the answers because we have quite many. So if possible, I would also like to try to go through each of them and maybe also give the chance to the other presenters to respond. So let's maybe go to each of them gradually. So we also have a question for Alan. Alan, so you're saying that the customer chatbot is the top use case to tackle as telcos. Can you share some results why you say this is the top use case to tackle? Is it because it's not complex? It will increase the NPS with X amounts?
Yep, great question. So yes, I think that it comes from two different angles. One is the easiest or the most natural one to tackle with the Gen AI. I mean, we're talking about large language models, and what would be more easier or more of a better fit than a conversation to be read, understood, and then writing the response. Plus, the customer care is always an angle where, or an area where there's a lot of investment, a lot of improvement needed, and a lot of saving can be brought to this area. So we are seeing, when talking to CSPs, that there is a lot of interest around chatbots. It's the easiest. It's the one that maybe I can say is the closest under the light when you talk about generative AI. And that's why I'm so enthusiastic and so eager to see the continuance of this journey towards areas that are beyond the expected, so to say, chatbot using language and go to further and very interesting areas like revenue leakage that we have mentioned earlier, like churn and connection between network statistics and churn and proactive response to that.
Thank you. If anyone wants to add something, or we can go to the next question. Okay, so we have another question from Alan and maybe for Jonathan. So as I understand the generative AI, or to paraphrase a Belgian tech journalist, it's a text auto-complete on steroids. How does this work on data? Example, network data. Don't we need other kinds of AI for that?
So I hadn't read that phrase. That's a great phrase. I would love to know who Francis, that Belgian tech journalist is. Text autocomplete on steroids. Yes, I suppose that is a fair analysis because it is completing a thought or responding to a query, and it does need lots and lots of data. And so that is why in our example that we gave, that Jared showed, the data of the bills, and even in fact the details, the CDR records, those were stored somewhere else. The data does not need to be in Salesforce. We want to make sure everybody understands that. In fact, we wouldn't want that data in Salesforce. It's not an effective use. We would have it in AWS S3 buckets. We would have it in Snowflake. We could have it in Aria. We could have it in other billing systems. We could have it in other BSS and OSS components. And the only thing we need is the ability to query it, the ability to access that data and then analyze it. And so do we need different kinds of AI? We can do that, and we can do predictive AI based on external data. We've been doing that for a decade. As we look about generative AI, the more data we have, the cleaner that data is, the better the response. And so accessing that data using tools, for example, I showed the example with Salesforce Data Cloud, which really is a tool to go and access external data, harmonize it, clean it so that we can correlate the data, and then the generative AI can act upon it. So yes, having lots and lots of data is critical. Having that data be clean is critical, but that data will exist in situ wherever it exists. And we're simply going to query it to learn from it in order to better ground the prompt, provide more context, and then provide the best response.
Jonathan, this is Wim from ETIS. I think the question is also related to the type of generative AI. I think what we didn't present yet is the difference between the different Gen AI technologies. And I think the question was related also to text-based generative AI, where basically you predict the next word based on lots of data in the system. But there are other types of generative AI, and I think Einstein is probably one of them. Perhaps you can also clarify what the difference is between, for instance, Einstein and OpenAI or the ChatGPT technology.
We're just debating who's going to respond. So Einstein is our overall branding at Salesforce for everything that has to do with AI, whether it's predictive or generative, and eventually other types as well. The models, either the predictive models that you would look at in R, or the way you would use them with various generative AI engines, that's very open. Whether it's OpenAI, or whether it's the work that our friends at AWS have done, whether it's create your own in an AWS world, whether it's Anthropic, Cohere, or others, those are all different tools that you would use for different types of use cases or actions. And it is not exclusive. In fact, it's very inclusive, very open, because that's one of the principles that we have, that you will use the right tool for the right task. And so we're not going to dictate that. In fact, we're going to give, in partnership with many of our great systems integration partners and our partners like AWS, we'll give you the ability to pick which is the right tool for the task.
And I think, if I may, that this is exactly the question, which I think I touched it briefly, between the chatbot and the wider functionality for generative AI. I think that autocomplete on steroids is a great way to put it, and a very funny way to put it, but that's limiting the discussion to the chatbot type of generative AI, whereas I can tell you about other use cases, about a demo that we have demoed together with a couple of other partners to identify potential churn customers based on the number of dropped calls that a customer had on a specific cell tower or in a specific area. And as a result of that, use Gen AI to initiate a case, to initiate a ticket, to submit a ticket to the network teams. Please mute whoever is not muted. So, and potentially even trigger a ticket to the network people to prioritize fixing a specific dropped call issue in a specific area, because it has high potential for high churn, potential of churn of customers in that area, and things like that. This is exactly where Gen AI goes beyond the autocomplete on steroids to much more proactive and much more efficient use cases.
Yeah, that's definitely also the way we see it, and that's also what we want to discuss in the gathering in Prague coming up, because it's indeed chat bot type of generative AIs, but that's only a small fraction. I think for network management, planning, optimization, software engineering, also the cybersecurity improvement, you need other kinds of generative AI, and those definitely also need to be looked upon. So we want to see the whole spectrum in the conference. But so perhaps the next question.
Yeah, we still have time for maybe 2 more questions. So a question for Alan: what is the language model behind AWS, and how does it compare to other language models? How much integration has happened with Anthropic flexibility to integrate, and also flexibility to integrate with other language models?
Yeah, so as I think I already responded to this one in the Q&A itself in writing, but I'll gladly address it here as well. So as I said, AWS is very open with the different foundation models that you can use with the different AWS services. So if you use Bedrock, there's a large variety of different models that you can use. And on the call to Bedrock, you have to define which model you want to query per the context that you are querying. There's an AI21 models, there are Anthropic models, there are many kinds of different models used under the hood with Bedrock. And if you want to go beyond, if you want to go further than that, you can use SageMaker as well with different kinds of models. And there you can fine-tune the model, you can create your own model, and allow the flexibility that is needed to serve any course or any challenge that you're looking for. And that goes back again to the question of, I love it, autocomplete on steroids, which is one type of model, But if you want to use other models for different uses, like code generation or like other uses, you can always use those with different models in different services. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. Okay, maybe let's have a question also for Jared. So, Jared, in the demo, it is the language model and the train model in Salesforce or ARIA.
Yes, so that the language model that we used was one that was from Salesforce. We're leveraging Einstein AI as part of that demo.
Thank you. Question for Jonathan: how do we deal with hallucinations? Have you analyzed the accuracy of the recommendations for the billing? Any spotted hallucinations?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this earlier, that in the Salesforce implementation, we're grounding the data and the prompt, grounding data into the prompt before it goes out. We're anonymizing it or masking it, going out to the large language model, getting the response back. Then we're putting the personal data back in. And then at that point, there's two additional steps. One is to check for hallucinations. The next one is to check for bias, to make sure we're not being biased. And then that response is presented back to the user. And again, this is where we have the human in the loop, the reinforcement learning through human feedback. So there's, in fact, 3 steps there. We're checking for hallucinations, checking for bias, and then presenting to the human to actually be that final filter and apply it out to the end customer.
Thank you. Thank you for the answers. Maybe we have time for one more question. I think this one is for Jared. So Jared, did we fine-tune the model in OpenAI trained on the invoices from the CSP?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Did we fine-tune a model in OpenAI trained on the invoices from the CSP?
Yeah, yes, we did. So we fine-tuned the model to do a comparison, look at the invoices available, and identify the invoice that was the highest invoice, and then also within that highest invoice, the top 5 calls that looked like they would be impacting that out of band invoice.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think our time for today it's over. So if there are additional questions, ideas or suggestions, or why to engage further on the topic of AI, we will tackle this topic at the gathering in Berlin. And in Berlin, sorry, Berlin was last year, next year in Prague. So as you know, the ETIS community is warmly invited to this wonderful 2 days event. So I really hope to see you there. Thank you so much to our presenters for a smooth presentation today, for answering to our question, for this, let's say, holistic view of the AI, strategical as well as philosophical elements to consider. And yeah, I wish you to everyone happy holidays, and looking forward to see you in the next ETIS activities. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Stop the recording also.